out there. Welcome to the Life Stories podcast, a short chat sharing the tales of wonderful, extraordinary people. I'm life story writer Felicity Lenihan, and I believe everyone's story is important and should be told. Have a listen and see if there's anything in today's story that's similar to your experience. Hello, welcome Megan Elizabeth from Brisbane to the Life Stories podcast. Thank you for being my guest today. And
Thank you for letting me come on.
we're going to talk about your dad today. So tell me a bit
Yes.
about your dad.
My dad was pretty awesome. I guess you could say I was always a daddy's little girl. He was an amazing soul, very much about his family, very cheeky, quite reserved, but then also had this side that would just come out and I don't know. He'd be sitting there observing, watching, and all of a sudden he'd just say this little cheeky comment. He was just that loving person that did everything for his family.
Mm,
And yeah.
yeah. And what was his career? What was his work?
So he was a truck driver.
Yeah.
So he was always, you know, there was six of us in the family, so us four kids and mum and dad.
Yeah.
So obviously, he was very much that go out, work, earn money to support us all. He generally did that from truck driving,
Yeah.
spent a lot of time working, to be honest, to support us all, and to do that.
Mm.
I as a kid, actually for a couple of years, went with him. He used to drive a milk tanker around to all the farms. So some of my funnest memories were actually going to work with him in a truck and driving around in a truck half the day, going to all the farms and that with him. And, just so many silly memories of him singing Christmas carols and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and all those kind of things in the truck. That was my childhood memories. If he wasn't at work doing that, he was at home. We had like a small hobby farm and he was always kind of busy doing something,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah. 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 What a wonderful experience to go around in the truck with.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yes. And when did he retire from that work? Is that sort of work you can do right through to 70s or?
um, yeah, so he actually retired from that. Basically, he got cancer. So when I was about 21, we started to notice behavior changes and things like that.
Mm.
And then a little while after that, he was actually diagnosed with cancer. And when he was going through the chemo and radiation treatment, he actually gave up work. And because it got too much being in a truck driver, as much as, we'd all always trusted him driving us around, he taught all of us to drive. It actually got to a point that we felt unsafe with him being in a car, let alone a truck. So he had to give that away. And unfortunately, that was kind of then he went through the cancer treatment, he stopped working, and then we started to see, I guess, the decline and the dementia start to kick in and
Mm.
memory loss and things like that as well. So that was kind of he did that right up until he couldn't do it any longer. And then he started, declining from dementia.
Okay. So were they related, the cancer treatment and the dementia?
I have my theories. I think in some ways they were. Obviously, I don't have a medical background, but I think there was some connection maybe, in terms of just what that did to his body and his mind and going through all the stress of that and
Yeah.
everything that did to him. It was, so they actually removed the cancer and it was more preventative radiation and chemo. It did knock him around quite a bit. And I think that, whether there was already signs of the memory loss and that beforehand, and it just escalated that kind
Yeah.
of thing as well.
Yeah. And so how old was he?
So that was 10 years ago. So but it would have been about 61.
Quite young.
Yes, he was. So it was early onset frontal lobe dementia that he was diagnosed with. So he was quite young to be diagnosed with it as well.
Yeah. And so, what were the first things that you noticed this
um,
might be
there
dementia?
was like a lot of behavior changes things. Like dad had always been that very kind, sweet, gentle person. Aggression kind of started to kick in, and we started to see different signs in him,
Mm.
and it just kind of gradually got worse. I think going through losing my sister as well, when we were going through that, he couldn't comprehend what was going on.
Right.
I can remember sitting in the car with him and he just kind of looking over to him and going, like, realizing he was upset. And I kind of put my hand on his arm and went, it's okay. And he's like, I was meant to protect her because he couldn't, to him, he was in this different mindset. He couldn't comprehend what was going on. And in some ways, I feel like that's when the dementia kind of worsened as well. And it was similar 2 years before that, we'd lost my granddad. So it was like his father-in-law, but he was very close to him. My parents had been married for quite a while. So yeah, there was a lot of loss there that I don't think he could then process. So it kind of, I feel like that kind of made the dementia worse. And we noticed he couldn't deal with it.
Mm.
We noticed things like when he did watch the news, which he'd done his entire life, it was always 6 o'clock was news time in our family. He'd get aggro towards it.
Yeah.
And just display behaviors we'd never seen in him, kind of thing. So it was like really just seeing that he couldn't process what was going on as well.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. And so, what were the next steps? Well, did you all talk as a family about it, or did you talk with him, or?
Um, no. Um, I think there was some challenges in us accepting what was going on. It was at a time we were also dealing with having lost my sister.
Yeah.
Um, my mum probably tried to deal with it and protect us kids from it in some respects. Um, and so then it kind of just, it worsened. I think I could see it and I could see it getting worse. I could see the toll that it was taking on mum, which was a struggle for me as well. Seeing my mum basically had by that stage given up work as well to be his full-time carer.
Mm.
She was more of a carer than a wife, and it just kind of, yeah, it was taking its toll on her.
Mm.
It actually, we had to go through, dad needed knee surgery. So that wasn't the best experience. We were basically told by one doctor it's like putting him under anesthetic could make it worse, but it was like it was getting to a point mum couldn't deal with the fact that he could barely walk. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like this. We were sitting there one day, and it got to a point I was going to the doctor's appointments with my mum to support her. And we're sitting there going, well, it's either he can't walk or his memory is going to get worse. And going through that whole him getting knee surgery, mum and dad actually stayed with me for a while because, add painkillers to dementia and it's not the greatest combination, we learnt. And it was really like trying to navigate all of that as well.
Mm.
And then eventually it got to the point that dad actually had a fall at home,
Yeah.
and ended up in hospital.
Yeah.
And that was the point that we actually had to make a decision to put him into a nursing home because mum just couldn't do it
Yeah.
anymore. And I can remember sitting there with her and saying, that I was, when she was making that decision, and my parents were married for nearly 50 years. So, they'd been together since mum was about 16, 17, and always had each other. So that was a really hard thing for mum. And I can remember sitting there and actually saying to her, it's like, I am afraid of losing you as well,
Mhm.
because she was tired, she was exhausted, she was getting cranky at him in some ways. And, you know, we went through him being in hospital for a couple of weeks. You know, we went through seeing that he was getting aggro at nurses, and you know, they were having to medicate him for that, which is like the complete opposite. One of my cousins actually was one of the nurses, and she had this unique ability to actually be able to deal with him. So she was actually going up to his ward, the ward he was on, and actually helping out, because she literally could say Uncle Rob,
Yep.
and he would just he'd listen, whereas everybody else he wouldn't.
Yeah.
And I think that was just the person he was, and you know, that real family person and that uncle and that. So it was very much, yeah, that kind of would interrupt him, but otherwise, you know, we were seeing the behaviors. We were seeing that the doctors were struggling to actually work out what was wrong with him, because they were asking him what was wrong,
Yeah.
and he couldn't. Like, we saw him one day and he was in absolute pain, and the
Yeah.
doctors walked in, and because he never wanted to bother anybody, he's like, oh no, I'm fine. And we're like, no, he's holding his side, there's something there. So there was this whole like trying to investigate what was wrong with him, and all of that just was so hard. It was
Yeah.
so challenging. It was frustrating. They did end up nearly finding they did end up finding at one stage that he had a blood clot, and there was a weekend that we came very, very close to losing him.
Yep.
At that point,
Mm.
we didn't. And then it was like, then he went into the nursing home. We had issues with the nursing home. Again, the anger. And this is like, we're dealing with this angry version of our dad that we'd never seen before.
So
He
upsetting.
got, he got kicked out of a nursing home. And
No.
we've, I'll never forget a conversation that we had, that I got to the point that my mum, you know, would dad had been on hospital for a few weeks. I'm just like, look, I'm gonna work from her house,
Yep.
so that if the doctors call, I can be there as well. We can put it on speakers. And
Mm.
I think mum saw a side of me that day that she hadn't, and probably the side of me that came out at work.
Yep.
And because we had, the nursing home didn't want to take dad back because he'd been aggro, and the doctors were trying to send him back because they didn't want him in the hospital anymore.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to stand there and say, look, we need at least 24 hours to find a new nursing home for him.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we found a nursing home. We actually reached out to somebody to help us. There are people out there that actually help with that. And she was amazing, and she found us a nursing home within 24 hours, and that's where he ended up.
Yeah.
And they were fantastic.
Was that specific
And
dementia care?
initially it wasn't, but he then got moved across very quickly into the dementia area,
They
because
knew how
they'd
to
made some.
deal with the aggression.
Sorry.
They knew how to deal with the aggression more than the other.
Yeah, they were much better, and I think they managed to work out the medication and stuff like that as well. And it was a bigger area, because he'd always worked
Yeah.
and always been quite active. He would like to work. I
Mm.
think the one nursing home had been quite restrictive.
Yeah.
Whereas the second one, he could walk around, and like literally you'd go visit him and you'd literally just walk around, because he had jobs to do.
Yeah.
If he sat down, it's like, I've got jobs to do. I've got jobs to do. I've got jobs to do.
Mm.
So we kind of, you know, that it actually happened. We put him into the nursing home just before COVID.
Yeah.
So we actually had, you know, the first 6 months that he was in a nursing home, we couldn't see him.
Mm.
Which was really, really challenging, especially for my mum.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we went through a stage where, you know, you'd go, oh, I'm going to go see him. And then the nursing home would go into lockdown. So like we
Yeah.
kind of did that dance for a long time. In some ways, I think them not having so many people come in was actually good, because they were in this own little bubble.
Yeah.
But it was honestly a period of 2-3 years where it was like you were constantly waiting for the phone call to
Mm.
say something was wrong, to like, I knew the phone number of the nursing home when they rang, because I was like the second person they rang if they couldn't get onto mum. And then it got to a point at one stage he started having falls, and then they actually ended up having him in a wheelchair all the time. which I know was tough for me. Like, I can remember when I kind of was like, oh, he can't even walk anymore. And
Yeah.
that had been the one thing, like you went and visited him and you just walked around with him. You walked
Yeah.
around like that was, I think I was walking down the corridor one day and we were going up the Toowoomba range
Yeah.
because he kind of went back to this, what he was like when he was 21.
Yeah.
Like it was, which we always laughed because he always had this thing that he was forever 21. And it was funny because he went back to that. We had days where he looked at me and spoke like he was talking to my mum. And I think that was because I looked very similar to what she did at that age as well. So it was like
Yeah.
dealing with all of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. 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 So you were really the meat in the sandwich, dealing with your dad, dealing with your mum's upset, and doing all the logistics as well. Was that
Which
exhausting?
is probably good that I have a supply chain degree, and I think it was just being there for mum, to be honest, because it had always been her and dad,
Yeah.
sorting things out and doing things, and mum tried to deal with it for a long time until she she got really, I guess, was struggling because she was so tired, because she had been doing it for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. And was it a sense of relief for everyone once you found the right care for him, or was there a bit of sadness for your mum?
Um, I think there was relief once we found that right care.
Yeah.
And it was close enough that mum could go on a regular basis and that kind of thing. It was still a struggle. There was challenges with it. It was hard. There was times that you'd get the phone call and you'd kind of go, is this it? Is
Yeah.
this it? And like, this might sound really bad, but in some ways you were kind of, I'm going to say, hoping it was it because
Yeah.
like you're seeing him suffer
Yeah.
hurt so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like it got to, so eventually, um, in November 2022, his behaviors had started to change again and they sent him to a hospital.
Yeah.
They did a scan and they found a brain tumor.
Right.
And so, because of the dementia and because he'd had cancer previously, mum and I had spoken and we said, no, we're never going to put him through that again.
Yeah.
Basically, if he was to get cancer or anything like that again, we'd let it run its course.
Yeah.
Um, and so we found out about that. And I can remember a conversation with the doctor that he basically said, look, it could be days, weeks, months, it's not years. So we stood there and we heard that. And then thankfully, in some ways, it was only a month. So we had essentially a month that we knew he was going to die, didn't know when. That became really tough on mum going and visiting. And I think because we'd already lost my sister, she'd already lost her dad as well.
Mm.
And it was like just knowing that every time you went there, it could have been your last and kind of mum wanting to be there for dad.
Yeah.
And he actually, and I still think this is his cheeky little end point,
Yeah.
um, was that he passed away on Christmas morning. And I still think it's his cheeky way of going, you know what? I'm not going to let you sit around sad for a day.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
going to make it Christmas Day
Yeah.
because I have nieces and nephews, and so Christmas is always going to be a celebration for them.
Yeah.
And we were all, like, unfortunately I wasn't with mum when she got the phone call.
Yeah.
When she actually called me on Christmas morning, it was like 10 o'clock on Christmas morning. I just got to my brother and sister-in-laws and I was on the couch with my little people.
Mm.
And as soon as I've seen mum's name, I'm just like, I've answered the call. He's
Mm.
gone, isn't he? Like I knew at that point. And it wasn't the best Christmas, but I think there was part of me that's like, he passed peacefully. And I think this was the thing, like, there'd been a lot of guilt over the time. Like, it was that prolonged grief of knowing you were losing him, losing different parts of him each time.
Yeah.
And also that, yeah, constantly watching him decline, not knowing when it was going to happen. And kind of in some ways, it's like he came to peace on Christmas Day and, there was some relief for us because we didn't have to watch him actually suffer anymore.
Yeah.
And like he hadn't been the dad we grew up with for a long time.
Yeah. Did he know what was
And
happening with the brain tumor? Was he? No.
no, no. So by that stage, and for a long time, he didn't really understand what was going on. There was definitely moments where he seemed to.
Yeah.
Um, and like all through that process, probably like from when he went into the nursing home, especially like he'd just do little things. And
Yeah.
it was like he knew. And
Yeah.
it was like he knew you needed to hear it, and
Mm.
he'd just say something and you'd be like, oh, okay. Like there would just be that part of him. Like I'm pretty sure even one day like he used to have this saying, it's like you had to love each other because it's in the contract. Like there was a dad-daughter contract. You had to love each other. It's
Yeah.
in the contract. And he just said that one day.
Mm.
And, it's like, oh, there's this part of him we haven't seen for a long time.
Yeah, but it's still there somewhere.
But it's still there somewhere. And like, yeah, he'd just do these little things every now and then. But especially by the end, we just, that last month,
Mm.
there was less and less of him there. It was just, yeah, he
Yeah.
really started to decline in that period.
Yeah.
And it was really amazing to see the staff at the nursing home,
Mm.
because they had looked after him for like 2 or 3 years. And, we walked in on Christmas Day after it had happened, and just how they were to mum. And as much as, they had seen this aggressive side
Mm.
to him,
Yeah.
they also could see the side that we saw in him as well. And that very kind, cheeky, lovable character that he was.
Oh, they're angels, aren't they? Yeah.
Oh, they are. They
Thankfully.
are. I don't know how they do it, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's nice that you found a place like that eventually. And it was
Mm, mm.
goes, but yeah, yeah, yeah. And how was your mum? How's she been?
Journey. I think with it last year would have been their 50th wedding anniversary. So it's been hard on her. It's been
Mm.
hard to watch her have to go through that as well. It's even for myself, like it was interesting afterwards. Like, as I said, my sister passed away as well. And that was probably a more sudden, unexpected
Yeah,
situation. And, you know, I'd say like both, I don't know some days which is worse, the prolonged or the sudden.
yes,
And I think just that grief, and like as much as you've got the grief of one person, it's like anything that you hadn't dealt with back here as well, that kind of popped up again as well.
yeah,
And I know for myself personally, I started to notice like I was busy at work, and one of my coping mechanisms is to be that logistical person. That is my strength. It's just to sort out the funeral, to do all that kind of stuff,
yeah.
make sure everyone else is okay. And I went back to work a couple of days after the funeral, because like then we had a 2 week period where we had to organize the funeral and that, and you make yourself busy again.
Mm.
You do all of that, and yeah, I actually noticed a couple of months after that I was doing exactly what I'd done with my sister and running from that grief, not dealing with it. And it was interesting to kind of see it again and be able to recognize it's like, oh, hey, I'm actually not processing this. And I actually ended up taking some time off work, and, we needed to organize a headstone. So mum and I went and did that. And it was honestly that moment that also, I think because dad had been that, and dad had always wanted to travel. He'd always been this, he always focused on us kids and work and providing for us. But he always wanted to travel in retirement.
Yeah.
And it was actually picking out his headstone. I mean, my joke that week was that we had a preferred supplier of headstones because it was the second one that we'd got. Plus, my grandparents had come from there as well. So I have some dark humor when it comes to death these
Yeah,
days.
yeah,
But it was actually that point that kind of just got me to, it's like, you know what? I don't want to stay in a job that's not actually making me happy. And I worked out, I took some time off. I actually faced the grief and I actually watched a TV show. And it was funny because this particular TV series, the mum passed away with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And I was literally sitting there sobbing as
Mm,
they did because it just brought back absolutely everything.
yeah.
Um, and that was the point. I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to make a change in my career because it's funny, Dad, going in the truck with Dad when I was little, he always said I was allowed to do anything I wanted
Mm,
except for become a truck driver.
mm.
And I chose the uni degree, probably the closest related to him. I kind of fell into it, but I ended up in supply chain and logistics management. My first job out of uni was as a logistics graduate at a transport company.
Yeah, right. As
like,
close to it as you
you know,
could get without doing it.
yeah, pretty much. I went as close.
Yeah.
And
So what was your
yeah, so
what was the new
I
change
think
of direction?
so actually I've moved out of the corporate world, and that was the push I needed and into my life coaching and business coaching business,
Yeah.
which kind of came I had been on the side for a while after working through the grief of losing my sister, to be honest. That kind of was the trigger point to get into coaching for myself. And then I kind of fell in love with it and decided I wanted to move that direction.
Yeah.
It's probably more now my business has become a combination of those two. So it's a bit of the life coaching and business coaching. I did supply chain, but I always end up in like business improvement, supply chain improvement roles. So that was always what I did. So
Yeah.
kind of like quite fits well with the coaching. It's
Yeah.
all molded into each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just I guess reflecting on what Dad had done, he'd always worked, he'd always done all this stuff,
Mm.
but then he hadn't necessarily followed what made him happy or traveled and all of those kind of things. And he never actually got a chance to do that. And I think that's where I was like, no, I'm not going to let this
That's a
be
lesson
my
he
story.
gave you. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so that was a bit of a push. So he's
Yep.
still affecting my career. He affected it in the beginning, and I still love supply chain. I still love that kind of stuff, and I want to help other businesses, especially small businesses, with that.
Yeah.
But it's also doing it in a different way now with my own business, and
Mm.
in a way that I also have the flexibility to live my life as well. Because
Yeah.
to me, I saw Dad work, and even in a nursing home, he
Mm.
was just so concerned about getting jobs done.
Yeah.
Like it was so ingrained in him to work, and it's just like, no, I want to live and enjoy life as well, because he did have this, he had such a joy to him as well,
Oh, that's
that I wish he
beautiful.
had got to travel more.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. What a beautiful story. He's given you, well, it's very sad and unfortunately common to a lot of people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that because I think people will resonate and feel like they're not going through it alone as well. So,
Mm.
but
And I think that's the
beautiful.
thing.
I
It's
love
it's
the
hard
life.
going through it,
Yeah.
and I can remember even after losing my sister, I made a comment to one of my friends. It's like the worst and the best thing that's ever happened to me,
Yeah.
because it's shifted how I view life. And yeah, it's felt lonely, and like a lot of people don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I do what I do now, especially in the life coaching side of being
Yeah.
able to help people work through those kind of things as well and have the support they need with
Mm.
somebody who's, understands that, while I don't understand every situation, I can support them through that and what's happening for them as well.
Yeah. 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 Yes. Well, thank you very much for sharing that beautiful story. I love the way you look at Christmas Day now. That's his stamp on it. You want to enjoy this day. You're not going to
Yeah,
be sad. So
exactly.
fantastic. So thank you very much for sharing with me on the Life Stories podcast today. And if you want to know a bit more about Megan, I'll put her business in the notes for everyone. So thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed our chat today. Was there something in it that resonated with your own life? If you found it interesting, this might very well mean your story is interesting too. Tell someone and record it because your story is important.